Hi, my name's Linnea Reyes. 2 years ago, I woke up in the ICU with tubes in my chest, and no one came. When I called the only parents I knew, they told me, handle it yourself. The next morning, the police ran a routine DNA test, and just like that, I was erased from their family tree. I was never theirs. What hurts more? The lie that raised me, or the silence that followed when I found out? And now, when they try to erase my face from their photos, I wonder. Was I ever loved at all? Or was I just part of their cover-up? Rain had been falling for 3 days straight in Eugene. Not the kind that comes and goes, but the kind that lingers, heavy, unending, as if the sky itself had forgotten how to stop grieving. By the third night, it felt like the whole town was breathing water. I was driving home from school, my windshield wipers fighting a losing battle. The clock on my dashboard blinked 8:47 p.m. My eyes ached from grading essays, and my thoughts were drifting to lesson plans, unpaid bills, and the voicemail from my mother I still hadn't returned. Call me when you grow up, she'd said weeks ago. I never did. The light ahead turned yellow. I should have stopped. But exhaustion blurred judgment, and my foot pressed down instead. A flash of chrome. Headlights, too close, too fast, veered from the left. Then came the screech of tires, the sick twist of metal folding into itself, a white bloom of airbag, a crack of bone against belt. Then, nothing. Just the long, high-pitched ringing that seems to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. When I woke, I was drowning again, but this time in the sterile hum of a hospital room. The ceiling lights hummed faintly, painting the world in pale gray. My throat burned when I swallowed, and my neck screamed when I tried to turn. A nurse appeared, kind eyes and steady voice. "Good evening, sweetheart," she said. "You're at Sacred Heart Medical Center. You've been unconscious for nearly 12 hours. Her words floated through me, strange and distant. "Did anyone call?" I whispered. Her pause was brief but heavy. "Not yet, honey. Try to rest." That pause said everything. Hours crawled by, punctuated by beeping monitors and murmurs behind the curtain. My body felt like a puzzle someone had put back together wrong. When I finally asked for my phone, a younger nurse brought it. "I need to call my parents," I rasped. "Verena and Ambrose Vane." Her eyes flicked to the clipboard. "There's no emergency contact listed for you, Ms. Vane." I blinked, thinking I'd misheard. That can't be right. They've always been my contact. She gave that soft, pitying smile, the kind that precedes bad news. "It's not an error. The file shows the field was updated last month and left blank." Left blank. The words landed heavier than the crash itself. They knew, and they'd chosen silence. The nurse adjusted my blanket, whispering something gentle, then disappeared. But sleep didn't come. The rain outside tapped against the glass like a slow clock. Each heartbeat on the monitor pulsed an accusation, "You're still here." But for whom? Around midnight, I dialed their numbers. Straight to voicemail. Verena's last message echoed in my head, her polished voice, clipped and cold, "Handle it yourself." At the time, it had been about car repairs. Now, it sounded like prophecy. By morning, light seeped weakly through the blinds. A tray of oatmeal sat untouched. My body felt heavier than bone, weighted by invisibility. The doctor came in, polite but mechanical. "You're stable. We'll keep you under observation another day." Then he left before I could ask what stable meant when your entire sense of belonging was gone. I stared at my reflection in the black screen of my phone, pale skin, bruised temple, eyes hollow from too many nights of pretending not to care. I remembered birthdays spent alone upstairs while Verena hosted charity galas below, and Ambrose slipping a cold pat on my shoulder before disappearing into his study. Even at 10, when I'd fallen off my bike, she hadn't asked if I was hurt. Only said, "You'll scar if you keep crying." Maybe the truth had always been printed in the margins of our family story. I just refused to read it. When the nurse returned, I asked again, "Are you sure nobody called?" She shook her head softly. "I'm sure, sweetheart. Maybe a friend will check in soon." A friend. The word almost made me laugh. My world was small: students, lesson plans, overdue bills. No one beyond that orbit would notice if I vanished. I almost pressed the call button again, but stopped. What was I even asking for anymore? A mother's warmth? A father's hand on my shoulder? Or just proof that I existed to someone, somewhere? I lifted my wrist. The hospital bracelet glinted under the fluorescent light. Linnea Vane. The letters looked official, printed clean and neat, but they felt like a stranger's name. I swung my legs off the bed. My feet met the cold linoleum. Pain flared, sharp and real, but I forced myself upright. The mirror above the sink caught me in fragments, a ghost in a paper gown. "Am I really their daughter?" I whispered to my reflection, "or just an obligation they forgot to cancel?" The 4-line tugged hard. My vision blurred. A nurse rushed in, catching me as my knees buckled. "Easy. You'll tear your stitches," she said, guiding me back to the bed. Her hands were firm, kind, everything a mother's should have been. When the room quieted again, shame crept up my throat. Not because of the accident, but because I still wanted them to come. Hours blurred. I watched the ceiling tiles, tracing tiny cracks between them. Down the hallway, someone was crying, a sound raw and human. It threaded through the air until it became my own heartbeat. By evening, the rain finally thinned. Outside my window, the hospital sign flickered across the wet pavement, reflecting gold and blue. I imagined people returning home, doors closing behind them, laughter echoing through kitchens. Somewhere, someone was being missed. But not me. I looked once more at the bracelet. Vane. Once, it meant heritage, old money, old pride. Now, under the sterile light, it felt hollow. Replaceable. Plastic. If I had died last night, I whispered to the empty room, would anyone have claimed my body? The monitor answered in steady beeps, indifferent, eternal. I closed my eyes. The name Vane echoed until it no longer felt like mine, just a label I was done wearing. Morning light cut through the blinds in thin, golden blades, casting sharp lines across the pale walls of my hospital room. I hadn't really slept, just floated in and out of broken dreams, each one fading into the same name echoing in my mind, Vane. The hallway outside was calmer than the night before. The distant shuffle of nurses' shoes, the low murmur of voices, the soft beeping of machines, life moved on, indifferent to the fact that mine felt paused. From the corner of my eye, I noticed 2 nurses standing near the door, speaking in hushed tones. They didn't know I was awake. "She's the one, right?" The woman with no listed family, the younger nurse whispered. The older one gave a half-shrug. "Yeah. Poor girl." Social worker tried her emergency contacts again. Still no answer. The younger nurse frowned. "Didn't they say her name's Vane?" "That family's pretty well known in Eugene." "Exactly why they might be avoiding it," the older nurse replied. "Some families don't want their messes going public." I swallowed hard. Their mess. Is that what I was? The 4 tugged slightly as I shifted, and both nurses startled. They gave forced smiles and scurried away, pretending to check monitors as they left. This wasn't the first time I'd heard whispers like that, rumors about the Vane family and the way they curated their image. Verena and Ambrose Vane, polished, respected, admired. They hosted charity galas and made holiday cards with curated smiles. But behind closed doors? I was more tolerated than treasured. Polished furniture mattered more than honest conversations. Now, lying here with bruised ribs and a stitched forehead, something hollow gnawed at my gut. What if I was never theirs in the first place? The door creaked open, and a man in a gray windbreaker entered, holding a notepad. Late 40s maybe, steady eyes, no-nonsense demeanor. "Miss Vane?" "Yes," I croaked, my throat dry. "I'm Officer Sloan Verity, Eugene PD, sorry to bother you, but I need to ask a few questions." He glanced at my chart, then back at me. "Is this about the accident?" I asked. "In part," he replied. "We tried to reach your parents last night, no response. So the hospital initiated federal ID protocol. Standard these days when someone arrives unconscious without confirmed next of kin." I tensed. "And?" "Well, your DNA didn't match either of the emergency contacts listed under Verena or Ambrose Vane." I stared at him. "That's impossible. There must be a mix-up." Sloane's tone softened. "We verified the test twice. These things happen, undocumented adoptions, paperwork errors." "No. That doesn't make sense," I insisted. "They're my parents." He nodded slowly, not arguing, just letting the weight of his words settle. "Would you like to see the data?" I hesitated, then nodded. He stepped out briefly, murmured something to someone in the hallway, then returned with a hospital-issued tablet. "Here. This is your birth record from the Oregon database." The document loaded on screen. It had my name, my birth date. Listed parents, Verena and Ambrose Vane. But at the bottom, a small detail blinked at me, file updated, March 2023. I was born in 1992. Why would my birth certificate be updated 30 years later? "That's what we found odd," he said. "The original scan was removed and replaced. The metadata flags it as a resubmission." My stomach turned. Who would change a birth record? That's what we're trying to understand. But I wanted you to see this before it becomes an official inquiry. Maybe your family has an explanation. I looked away, heart hammering in my chest. They never said I was adopted. Ever. "Sometimes people keep things quiet for years," Sloan offered gently. "But it's your right to know. If you want us to dig deeper, we can. For now, we'll hold off." He left me alone with the tablet, the silence deafening. I tapped through the file again. The document felt real, but it wasn't. Not anymore. Not with that silent edit. Suddenly, old moments sharpened with new edges, Verena avoiding questions about baby pictures. Ambrose's offhand comment at a dinner party, "We decided late in life to raise her, it felt right." At the time, I'd thought he meant sacrifice. Now it sounded like confession. I needed proof. I pulled my phone toward me, logged into the Oregon Vital Records portal. With my teacher credentials, I had limited access. I found my file. Again, the date of last update, March 2023. This wasn't just a paperwork issue. It was intentional. The nurse came in, offering water and suggesting I rest. I asked her to close the blinds instead. I couldn't bear the light. Not now. When she left, I forced myself to walk to the bathroom. My body ached with every step, but I needed to see my reflection. The woman in the mirror looked like me, but different. Tired. Angry. Afraid. I turned on the cold water, splashed my face, and stared. "Who am I?" I whispered. No answer came. Back in bed, I opened a blank note on my phone and typed. "If the people who raised me lied about who I am, what else have they buried?" I stared at those words until they blurred. Not just a question anymore. A vow. I stayed in the hospital 2 more days. They called it observation, but the truth was simpler, I wasn't ready. The outside world felt too loud, too real. I needed white walls, routine footsteps, and silence thick enough to disappear into. When they finally discharged me, I returned to my small apartment in Seattle. The rain hadn't let up, it followed me like a quiet companion. Everything inside looked just as I left it, a half-read book, a dying plant, the faint scent of lavender from a melted candle. Familiar things. But I wasn't the same person anymore. That night, sleep refused to come. Officer Sloane's words echoed again and again, no genetic match. I tried to breathe through it, to make sense of it, but the harder I tried, the louder my thoughts got. Then I heard her voice. Zinnia. Callista's daughter. My niece, or so I had believed. It was 5 years ago, during a family dinner in Portland. The Vanes hosted those events like stage plays, perfect silverware, manicured conversations, compliments traded like currency. I had driven 2 hours to attend, clinging to the hope that maybe, for once, I would feel like I belonged. I remembered Verena pouring wine without looking my way. Ambrose launching into a monologue about stock trends. And Callista, of course, basking in the glow of her latest vacation pictures. Zinnia, around 13 then, sat across from me, sharp chin, sharper tongue. I was reaching for a bread roll when she said it, clear as a bell. You don't really belong here, do you? You're just the guest who never left. The air froze. Verena's fork stopped midair. Callista laughed softly and said, "Honey, don't be rude." But she didn't deny it. Ambrose muttered something about teenagers being honest, and the conversation quickly moved on. I smiled through it. Said, "That's one way to look at it." But it lodged deep, like a splinter under skin. Now I saw it for what it really was, not just cruelty, but a glimpse of the truth. Maybe Zinnia had sensed it before I did. I got out of bed and stared at my reflection. Bruises still yellowed my face, but it wasn't the wounds that unsettled me, it was the hollowness behind my eyes. The question I couldn't unask. They've always known, I whispered to the glass. The memories came back, one by one. Verena never used nicknames with me. Ambrose always said your mother instead of mom. One Christmas, everyone received engraved lockets. Verena handed me a scarf and said, "We didn't think you'd want jewelry." Of course they hadn't. Because they never saw me as theirs. By morning, I knew what I had to do. I called the hospital records office, pretending to follow up on my discharge forms. The woman on the other end was polite, distracted, and just talkative enough. She mentioned an old nurse who'd made a comment about something strange from that night in '91. Her name's Freya Keene. She's retired, but still volunteers in the pediatric wing. Try the cafe next door, she's usually there around lunch. 2 days later, I was there, hands wrapped around a coffee I wasn't drinking. Kids laughed down the hallway, their voices sharp against the background hum of hospital machines. My stomach twisted. Then a soft voice, "Ms. Vane?" I looked up. A woman in her 60s stood before me, her gray-streaked hair tied back, cardigan sleeves rolled to her elbows. Her name tag read Freya. "I shouldn't say this," she began, lowering her voice, "but I remember you." "You do?" Freya nodded. "You were the baby in room 203. Back in '91. I blinked. "I don't understand." She sat across from me, folding her hands tightly. There were 2 babies admitted to the nursery that night, both girls, both premature. One was listed under the name Reyes. The other, Vane. She paused. By morning, the bracelets didn't match. The Reyes baby had vanished, and the Vane name was on a different infant. The world narrowed. "Are you saying I was switched?" Freya nodded. Nothing was proven. But the charge nurse left soon after. She told me in confidence it was a mistake she couldn't fix, and then she disappeared. The Vanes had power. The hospital didn't want scandal. And Marta Reyes, the other baby's mother, she died shortly after childbirth. No family, no money, no one to raise alarm. Marta Reyes. The name I'd seen on a hidden file. "You're sure about the name?" Freya reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope, worn, yellowed, fragile. Inside was a faded photograph of a newborn in a pale blanket. The corner bore the initials MR. "That's the Reyes baby," she said. "You, I believe." My breath caught. The tiny features were hard to see, but something inside me clung to them anyway. "Do Verena and Ambrose know?" I asked. "I think they found out later," Freya said quietly. "They had documents changed. That doesn't happen on accident." I clutched the photo, unsure whether to keep it close or push it away. My whole body hurt, grief, rage, disbelief fighting for space. "I should have spoken up," Freya whispered. "But I was young and scared. That family, they don't let go of secrets." "They still don't," I murmured. I stood up slowly, voice low but firm. "You did the right thing by telling me now." Freya gave me a trembling nod. "Be careful, Linnea." I left the cafe and stepped into the chill of the city. Everything looked the same, but nothing felt real. Back at my car, I unfolded the photo once more. The baby's face was almost gone, worn by time. But somewhere deep inside, I recognized her. I had been living someone else's life. Now, I had to find the one that was taken from me. It arrived before the birds. A soft thump at the door. I didn't expect anything, certainly not at that hour. When I opened the door, a thin mist coiled around my ankles like something half alive. On the step sat a single package. Plain. Gray-wrapped. No label, no return address, only my name written in tight, mechanical print. I stood there for a beat, bare feet on cold tile, staring at it. Something about the weight of the air warned me. My fingers hesitated, then reached for it. Inside, after peeling back the tape with slow, uncertain hands, I found a padded envelope. Then, a single white envelope tucked within it, stamped in red, confidential. I didn't open it right away. I couldn't. My hands were shaking, and my breath came shallow. I held it against my chest and walked upstairs like I was carrying a newborn made of glass. The kitchen was quiet. My coffee from earlier sat cold beside the sink. I laid the envelope beside it, then sat down, elbows on the table, staring at the flap like it might open on its own. I don't know what I expected. Maybe I already knew. When I finally tore it open, I felt like I was watching someone else's hands move. The document inside slid free, heavy with silence. My heritage DNA report. Name, Linnea S. Result, maternal match, Marta Reyes. I stopped breathing. Time crawled. That name. Marta Reyes. It sat on the page like it had always been there, like it had always belonged to me. But it hadn't. Not until now. The sound that escaped me was somewhere between a gasp and a sob. The kind that curls up from the gut, sharp and buried. I clutched the paper as if it might vanish. My real mother. Marta Reyes. Freya had said her name during one of those rare, lucid moments when her medication hadn't yet dulled her. She said I was taken. Switched. Hidden. It was the kind of story that sounded like trauma speaking in tongues, something that had always been easy to dismiss. Until now. Until I was holding proof. I stood abruptly, chair scraping back. My body moved before my thoughts caught up. I grabbed my laptop, the paper still clenched in my hand, and typed through a blur of tears. Marta Reyes Obituary, Oregon. There it was. Simple. Sparse. 10 years ago, she died in a car accident. No photo, just a few stark lines of text. Marta Reyes, 38, passed away in a single-vehicle crash on Highway 97. Survived by one daughter, not located. Not located. My knees buckled slightly as I backed into the wall, slowly sliding down until I sat on the floor. She had searched. She had died searching. I had never known her name, her voice, or even her face. But she had remembered me. And I had never remembered her. My hands clutched my head as I sat there, letting the sorrow settle in. But not just sorrow. Beneath it, something else stirred. A resolve. A cold fire. My phone buzzed on the table. A notification. Instagram, Callista posted a new reel, Verina's gallery night. I almost ignored it, until I saw the caption, Unfiltered Moments. Mic was still rolling. I tapped it. The video began with warm lighting, wine glasses, and Callista laughing next to Verina. Elegant, curated, perfect. But the audio, barely audible at first, held something else. A voice near the camera, female, soft, almost playful. And cruel. I told Ambrose she never should have survived that night. The words cut through me like broken glass. My breath stilled. That voice, so familiar, yet foreign now in its naked contempt. It was Callista's. The clip took off like wildfire. Within minutes, the comments swelled. Is she talking about Linnea? She sounds like she's confessing to something. What night? What happened? That's her own sister? Who talks like this? The veil had slipped. And the world saw it too. I couldn't stop shaking. Not just from grief now, but from the cold grip of something darker, betrayal too old to name. I had spent years questioning myself, wondering if I was too sensitive, too broken. But now, the world heard it too. Then my inbox pinged. An anonymous message. They've lied to more than just you. Be careful. I stared at it for a long time. There was no number, no way to reply. Just that sentence, hanging in the air like smoke. I sat back at the kitchen table, the sun barely risen outside, the world slowly waking. But I felt detached, like I was watching life through a two-way mirror. The DNA. The video. The text. Every thread pulled tighter. I opened my contacts, scrolling past the names that had once meant something, Verina. Callista. Ambrose. I didn't pause. Instead, I typed in a number I had stored years ago, almost never used. One belonging to someone I had avoided. Tomas Reyes. Marta's younger brother. My biological uncle. The line rang once. Twice. Then, on the third ring, someone answered. Not him. A young voice, the female, unsure. Hello? I cleared my throat, my voice low but steady. Hi. I might need to speak with your father. Tell him it's Linnea. There was a beat of silence. Then the girl said, quieter, wait, the Linnea? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. A shuffle. A muted call for Dad. And I waited. Waited for the past to answer. The call disconnected before I even had the chance to form a word. My hand, still clutching the phone, trembled slightly. I stared at the screen, the blank glow flickering against the walls of the hospital's hallway. My legs felt like they were cemented to the floor, but inside me, something had already begun to move. Something determined. Something unafraid of consequence. By the time the morning arrived, I was already behind the wheel of my car, driving north under a sky the color of steel. Seattle faded behind me, swallowed by fog and silence. Rain clung to the edge of every leaf, every blade of grass shimmering with tension. The road felt like a string pulling me toward the confrontation I'd long rehearsed in my mind, but never dared to begin, until now. In Everett, I parked beside a small cafe nestled between a second-hand bookstore and an old-fashioned bakery. The scent of espresso and toasted rye met me at the door. It was warm, familiar. It almost convinced me I was safe. But this wasn't a meeting for comfort. This was war disguised as coffee. Ambrose was already inside, seated at a corner table. He looked different. Not weaker, not smaller, just older. Time had traced lines around his mouth and grayed his temples, but his posture was the same, rigid, composed, ready to dismiss. I approached the table and sat without waiting for an invitation. "Good morning," he said, not even looking up from his phone. "Morning." My voice didn't shake, not even once. I slid the envelope across the table to him. He finally glanced up, his brows raising ever so slightly. "What's this?" I didn't blink. "Proof. I'm not your biological daughter. The DNA test confirms Marta Reyes is my mother." His jaw tensed, but he didn't reach for the envelope. "You think that matters?" "It does to me. It does to her. And it will to the people who've spent their lives being lied to." He leaned back, arms folding like a wall rising between us. "You're chasing ghosts, Linnea. What do you want? Money? Pity?" I shook my head. "I want the truth. And I want the name I was denied." He scoffed quietly. "You don't get to rewrite the past." "No," I said, standing, "but I get to expose it." I turned to leave, but he stopped me with a single sentence: "There's more at stake than you understand." I paused only a moment before stepping out into the cold again. Back in my apartment that afternoon, my phone rang. I nearly ignored it. Then I saw the name, Mason Leary. I froze. He was the Vane family's former legal counsel, the man whispered about in hushed tones, rumored to have signed away truths on behalf of Verena. I answered cautiously. His voice was gravelly now, old and low. "Linnea. It's time." My chest tightened. Time for what? To stop protecting people who don't deserve it. I have information, documents, logs, witness notes. Everything from the 1991 incident. I was there when the hospital first reported the missing infant. I was the one who redacted the files. My throat went dry. "Why now?" There was a pause. Then he said quietly, "Because I see how silence rots everything it touches. And because your mother, Marta, deserved to know the truth long ago." I swallowed. "Can you prove what happened?" "I can," he said. "But we'll need to go to the downtown archive. The originals are buried deep. But they're still there." I kept the reference codes, just in case. That night, under the cover of steady rain, I met him at the police archives. We passed through cold metal detectors and security protocols until we reached the back room, where old case files whispered in the dark. The shelves stretched high and heavy with dust. But the moment Mason pulled the right binder down, the past became painfully clear. I flipped through yellowed paper and faded ink until I found it. Complaint: Infant Reyes reported missing, June 1991. Suspected clerical error escalated. Nurse Keene's testimony included. No charges filed. File closed under humanitarian discretion. And beneath it, a note, scrawled by hand. Infant reportedly switched. Report withheld at family request. No further investigation. My lungs forgot how to breathe. Verena had been implicated. Not directly named, but her shadow was unmistakable. The phrasing reeked of cover-up. Humanitarian discretion was a clever shield, too clever for something so cruel. I took a photo of the document and turned to Mason. "Did you know, back then, what they were doing?" He looked at me, regret plain in his eyes. "I had suspicions. But suspicions don't stand up in court. Verena made sure of that." I walked out of the archive in silence, rain soaking my coat. The city lights blurred into pale golds and reds through the windshield. As I climbed into my car, my phone trembled in my hand again. This time, I called Verena. Her voice was ice when she answered. "Linnea." I didn't waste breath. "If you try to bury me again, I swear I'll take you down with everything I've found. You don't get to play mother anymore." I hung up before she could reply. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. I started the engine, only to find my windshield marked with fresh scratches. 3 letters stared back at me, VNE. I wiped them with my sleeve, but as the condensation faded, another message, written in red, seeped through. Go back to the hole you crawled from. For a moment, I sat motionless. The hatred. The warning. The reminder that even now, they were watching. But instead of fear, I felt fire. I gripped the steering wheel tight, eyes forward. Let them try to scare me. Let them try to erase me again. This time, I had proof. I had names. I had the will to fight. As I drove into the rain-soaked night, I didn't look back. The rebellion had begun. The sky over Seattle was a bleak, unrelenting gray. Clouds hung heavy, like they were holding their breath, waiting for the story to unfold. I gripped the steering wheel tighter as I eased into downtown traffic, the weight of that scratched message still etched in my mind, go back to the hole you crawled from. That wasn't just vandalism. That was a warning. A dare. And I was done being quiet. I parked in a dim garage near the Seattle Art Museum, the kind that smells of oil and mildew, where fluorescent lights flicker like nervous ticks. The silence inside my car was deceiving. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips. I stepped out and pulled my coat tighter against the coastal chill, my heels echoing softly as I walked toward the shimmering front of the gallery. Just beyond the carousel of umbrellas and couples taking selfies under shared coverings, the grand glass doors awaited, humming with the sound of murmured voices and clinking glasses. Verina's solo exhibition. Inside, spotlights bathed her abstract canvases in theatrical light, sweeping strokes of gold, violet, blue, as if each brushstroke screamed for attention. The crowd sipped their wine and tossed around words like balance, symmetry, truth as if their praise could elevate illusion into fact. I moved through them like smoke, present, but untouchable. My dress wasn't flashy, just sharp enough to say, I'm not here to blend in. Then her voice rang out, smooth and saccharine. Thank you all for coming tonight. My lifelong ambition is to capture truth in color. That was my cue. I took a step forward, and my voice, calm but unwavering, cut through the polite hush. Were you capturing it all along or hiding things you didn't want to admit? A ripple spread through the room. Conversations stopped. Glasses stilled midair. All eyes turned. Verena blinked. Her mask flickered, then reformed. You're early, she said, her tone sharp as glass. I didn't flinch. Some truths don't wait for your schedule. She tried to continue, tried to salvage her moment, but it was too late. The atmosphere had changed. Whispers began. Eyes flicked between her and me. And I didn't stop. I raised my voice. Did this art come from the same hands that stole a child? Gasps scattered like dropped glassware. Phones appeared. Cameras clicked. The hush turned electric. From my coat pocket, I pulled a small frame and held it high, a photograph, aged and grainy, of a woman holding a baby. The face was soft with time, but the resemblance to me was inescapable. Bone structure. Eyes. Sadness. This was my mother. Marta Reyes. Not the woman who stands beside these paintings. Verena's face drained of color. Her lips parted, but no words came. And then, she turned and disappeared through the back doors without explanation or apology. The crowd erupted. Some followed her, some huddled into hushed conversations. The illusion she had so carefully curated crumbled under the weight of the truth I had laid bare. I stood still, unshaken, surrounded by canvases that no longer meant what she had hoped they would. For a moment, I just breathed. I didn't cry. I didn't collapse. I stood in that room and reclaimed the space she had once stolen from me. I let her legacy tremble in the aftermath. Outside, in the alley behind the museum, the air was soaked in rain and silence. Concrete gleamed under the dim streetlights. I expected nothing more, perhaps solitude, maybe someone screaming my name in denial. Instead, a familiar figure emerged from the shadows. Nico. He looked different, sharper, older, dressed like someone who had something to prove. But it was his eyes that gave him away, watchful, calculating, always too late. Linnea, he said softly. I heard what happened. That was brave of you. His praise sounded like flattery dipped in guilt. I didn't respond. He stepped closer, the light catching the raindrops on his coat. I have contacts, media outlets, critics. I can help make sure your voice is heard. Really heard. And then I saw it, his phone, glowing in his hand. A screen showing my gallery invitation list, my private notes, contacts I hadn't shared with anyone. His eyes met mine and widened in panic. It's not what it looks like. I shook my head, the betrayal slicing clean. Don't insult me. I'm not your project. Not your redemption story. His shoulders fell. I'm sorry. I thought I could help. You could have helped then, Nico. Years ago. When I needed someone to believe me. He looked hollow. No more words came. I pulled out my own phone. The video from the gallery, my confrontation with Verena, was already being shared. I added the caption, when your mother chooses silence over truth. Then I hit post. Nico stood there, watching helplessly as the truth spread in real time. I blocked his number and turned away. The alley echoed with each step I took. I didn't look back. The gallery lights behind me were still burning, but the crowd had scattered. Only whispers remained online, in the art world, in every place Verena had built her empire. By the time I reached my car, the adrenaline had settled into something heavier. I rolled down the window, letting the cold air wrap around me. I didn't regret it. Not any of it. I'd struck back. And I hadn't needed anyone's permission to do so. The city stretched out before me, a blur of lights and shadows. I started the engine. The headlights cut through the rain, illuminating the road ahead. I wasn't the girl waiting for someone to come rescue her anymore. I was the woman who walked into the fire and didn't burn. I am no longer waiting for someone to claim me. I am claiming myself. The autumn wind whispered through the city like a quiet reminder that nothing stays the same forever. As I stepped out of my car, the chill kissed my cheeks and curled around my ankles. Wet leaves stuck to the sidewalk, the pavement slick from last night's rain. I adjusted the strap of my bag over my shoulder, my phone in one hand, my ID badge already clipped to my sweater like a shield. I was early, 10 minutes before the first bell, but I needed the quiet of the teacher's lounge before the day stormed in. The lounge smelled of burnt coffee and paper. A few teachers murmured softly, heads bent over mugs and emails. As I entered, a hush fell, not loud, but noticeable. Then I saw her, Megan, from the English department, her face pale as she held out her phone toward me. Linnea, did you see this? I took her phone, already feeling a chill separate from the air outside. My breath caught as I looked at the screen. It was a photo, one I recognized instantly. The Vane family, standing posed in front of their garden archway, all curated perfection. Except over my face, someone had plastered a huge cartoon smiley sticker. Bright yellow, mocking. The caption beneath it read, "Family is everything," posted publicly by Callista. My grip tightened slightly around the phone. A few others in the room glanced away awkwardly. No one spoke. I could feel the weight of their gazes, wondering how I'd react. Whether I'd cry. Whether I'd storm out. But I didn't do either. I took a breath. Swallowed the sting. And then, calmly but clearly, I said, "That's all they have left of me, isn't it?" Silence followed. A quiet kind of respect filled the space, or perhaps discomfort. I handed the phone back and sat down at the edge of the couch, placing my coffee beside me, though I had no intention of drinking it. My heart still pounded, not from anger, but from the clarity that came with humiliation. That sticker wasn't just a petty move. It was a declaration. You don't belong. You're not one of us. You don't even get a face. By noon, the internet had caught fire. The hashtags climbed fast: not your daughter, viral vein, erased but not gone. A local morning show mentioned the image in a segment. One guest praised me for speaking out, while another accused me of capitalizing on personal trauma. A podcast aired that afternoon titled "Is Linnea Vane Exposing a Hidden Truth, or Just Creating One?" Strangers filled comment threads with opinions. Some cruel, others empathetic. Some theorized I'd been adopted and this was all about inheritance. Others guessed it was revenge. A few called me a liar. A few more called me brave. My name wasn't just mine anymore. It had become a symbol, or worse, a spectacle. But beneath the noise, something inside me became very still. I realized I had a choice. They had tried to erase me with a sticker, a smile, and a lie. But I would define myself on my terms, not theirs. By 2 p.m., I was in Olympia, parked outside the courthouse. I sat for a moment in my car, watching the people come and go through the glass doors. Some held files. Some walked with purpose. I wiped my hands on my jeans. They weren't sweaty, just too still. Inside, the building smelled of polished tile and bureaucracy. The echo of footsteps bounced between beige walls. I approached the clerk with the same case file I'd carried for weeks: papers, ID copies, and my own letter of intent. She took it without comment. I waited on a plastic chair near a faded wall poster about civil rights. When my name was called, I stood. The formalities didn't take long. A few signatures. A few affirmations. And then, I hereby reclaim my birth name, Linnea Reyes. I hadn't expected to feel it, but I did. A release. Like something unshackling in my chest. The clerk smiled gently. Congratulations, Miss Reyes. Outside, a reporter stood by the entrance, camera in hand. He hadn't expected me to turn and look directly at him, chin lifted as the flash popped. But I wanted that photo out there, not edited, not erased, not framed by someone else's caption. That evening, I prepared 2 envelopes. One addressed to Verena. The other to Ambrose. Inside each, I placed a single photo, the one Freya had given me. Baby Marta Reyes in soft focus, holding a tiny child with her own eyes. On each, I attached a post-it note that read only: "You'll never touch me again." No other words. No threats. Just a boundary. After sealing them, I slipped them into the mailbox. The sound of the metal slot clicking shut was deeply satisfying. Done. Final. Back in my apartment, I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop, intending to draft a lesson plan. But an unread message caught my eye. Subject line: as next of kin to Marta Reyes, you may have legal rights to her foundation estate. My hands froze on the keyboard. I opened it. The email was formal, but clear. A legal team had discovered my petition and name change. It seemed Marta had left behind more than memories, something tangible, something protected. Something still mine. I leaned back slowly in my chair. It wasn't over. Not even close. But they'd tried to erase me, and I had reclaimed my name. Now I would reclaim everything else. The next morning, I woke with the echo of that email still resounding in my chest like a distant drumbeat. As next of kin to Marta Reyes. The phrase had changed everything overnight. What was once a ghostly silence in my life had shifted into something tangible, something undeniable. For years, I had carried questions with no answers. Now, I carried the weight of a name I was never supposed to reclaim. I got dressed slowly, choosing a navy blue blazer over a cream blouse, something professional, composed. I pulled my hair back, kept the makeup light. I didn't want to look rich or strategic, I just wanted to look like someone who knew why she belonged. Downtown Seattle buzzed with the usual weekday rhythm. The wind bit at my cheeks as I walked briskly toward the law office, but I welcomed it. The cold felt real, like a reminder that I was finally present in my own life. Inside the firm, the same attorney who'd first contacted me nodded as I entered. He motioned toward a large mahogany table. Waiting on it was a thick folder, neatly bound. I took my seat, palms pressed against the leather armrests. "This is your official inheritance paperwork," he said gently. "Your legal right to claim the Reyes Foundation as its rightful heir. These accounts, properties, and legal holdings have remained untouched for over a decade, because no one else could step forward. Until now." I reached for the folder with both hands. It felt heavier than it looked. Inside were documents that held the weight of absence, bank records, tax forms, nonprofit filings, annual board minutes. Some pages were blacked out. Others bore my name, hidden among legalese, attached to years I barely remembered. Yet it was there, me, woven like a ghost into the framework of something enduring. My fingers traced a signature. It wasn't mine, but I felt the echo of it in my bones. Behind every scribbled name was a silence I had grown up trying to understand. Behind every redacted line was an erasure that had finally failed. I exhaled, voice barely audible. Because no one ever imagined a forgotten girl would come looking. The moment should have felt triumphant. But the truth was quieter than that, less like a victory and more like a reckoning. By midday, the news had leaked. A local blog picked up a court filing. Then a reporter tweeted a blurry photo of me walking out of the firm. And just like that, the story caught fire. Seattle teacher claims inheritance of vanished philanthropist Marta Reyes. Reyes Foundation has heir. She's not who anyone expected. Social media exploded. My inbox flooded. Some messages were cruel, calling me a fraud, an opportunist, a liar desperate for attention. Others, strangers, mostly women, thanked me. They told me they believed me. That they were me. That they'd grown up as ghosts in their own homes too. I read them all. Every word. The hate hardened me, but the kindness cut deeper. It reminded me why I couldn't look away now. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by paper and silence. The documents from the foundation were spread across the wood surface. A digital cursor blinked on a blank Word document on my laptop. I took a deep breath and began to type. This inheritance does not belong to me alone. It belongs to the girls who were never given a name, a home, or a choice. This is for the unwanted. The erased. The invisible. I paused. My hands hovered over the keys. Then, slowly, I wrote. No child should grow up unsure whether she's wanted. The next morning, I traveled to a quiet suburb outside of Seattle. The sky was a crisp blue, dotted with the gold of turning leaves. Children's laughter danced on the air as families gathered near a modest construction site, where a banner fluttered, the Reyes home, groundbreaking ceremony. The name looked strange, yet familiar. Like a reflection I hadn't dared to see clearly before. A ribbon stretched across the entrance of the lot. Media vans were parked near the curb. Neighbors clustered together. A few children clutched balloons and handmade signs. Some simply watched, curious. I stepped up to the podium. Cameras clicked. I looked out across the crowd, not large, but meaningful. A mother with a stroller. A teenager holding her younger sister's hand. A girl with braces and a spark in her eye. I cleared my throat. When I was a child, I learned that a name could be taken. That belonging could be stolen. I let silence linger. But today I choose to build something stronger. This place is for the girls who were lost, to feel found. For the ones whose names were erased, to be named again. With that, I lifted the scissors and cut the ribbon. Applause erupted. It wasn't thunderous, but it felt pure. Real. The day unfolded with interviews, handshakes, quiet tears. I didn't speak about Verena or Ambrose. I didn't need to. The truth stood taller than bitterness. My presence was enough. As the crowd thinned, I wandered to a small magnolia tree newly planted in the courtyard, beside a simple stone plaque. In memory of Marta Reyes, may her roots continue to bloom. I knelt beside it, fingers brushing the soft soil. The branches above swayed gently. A petal fell and landed near my knee. I took out my phone. There was a new email. Subject, Verena Vane under investigation. My breath caught. I stared at the screen, unmoving. It wasn't over. But I didn't feel fear. I felt peace. Justice was stirring. The silence was breaking. I looked up at the dusky sky, whispered into the wind, "I'm home now, Mom." And for the first time in years, I believed it. I left the ceremony slowly, my heels crunching softly on the gravel path that led away from the lantern-lit courtyard. Behind me, voices lingered, laughter, clinking glasses, polite conversation fading into the warmth of evening. Magnolia petals fluttered down like whispers, catching the last copper edge of the sun. I didn't look back. Some chapters don't deserve a final glance. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket. I hesitated. After the whirlwind of everything, testimonies, hearings, tearful interviews, and awkward condolences, I was ready for silence. But the screen lit up with a message. Just my name. No subject. No sender. And when I opened it, a single line. Box 213. Safe deposit. Marta Reyes. That night, I sat alone in my private office at the Reyes home. The space was silent, except for the soft hum of the desk lamp and the sound of my own breathing. I'd long since taken down the clinical posters and sterile furniture. Now, it felt like home, muted blue walls, books lining the shelves, a window facing the garden. A soft knock at the door. It was a night clerk I barely knew, young, quiet, respectful. He held out a small padded envelope, sealed with red wax and stamped with an old signature. Marta Reyes. Box 213. He left without a word. I turned the envelope over in my hands, my fingers trembling. When I finally broke the seal, a folded letter slipped out, brittle with age, the corners worn. 2 versions, one in Spanish, one in English. Her cursive was faded, almost broken in places, the ink bleeding as if tears had touched the page. I read the English version aloud, my voice fragile in the silence. My soul couldn't forgive what they did. But if you read this, you survived. You're the only thing I ever got right. I couldn't hold it back. The tears came fast, unfiltered. Not because she had apologized, she hadn't. But because this was something more honest. It wasn't meant for anyone else. It wasn't curated or dramatized. It was her truth. A small, aching truth that filled every empty corner I'd carried for years. She hadn't been able to protect me in life. But in this letter, she gave me something no one else could, the confirmation that I mattered. That I had mattered to her, even if silently, even if too late. In the days that followed, justice moved without me. Word spread fast. Verena, once adored in elite circles, had been subpoenaed for an old investigation, the one she thought had been buried forever. Galleries quietly pulled her exhibitions. Donors pulled out. Online forums lit up with articles and commentary. And one morning, the front windows of her flagship gallery were defaced with red spray paint, thief of children. I didn't rejoice. There was no smile on my lips, no victorious cry. Just a sense of quiet order being restored. Not revenge. Not reparation. Just equilibrium. Later that week, a lawyer approached me outside the courthouse. Well-dressed, assertive, the kind who always smells like new leather and expensive cologne. He offered me options: lawsuits, financial damages, public apologies, even a media campaign. Verina's liability is clear, he explained, his tone sharp with confidence. With the right strategy, you could receive compensation and public acknowledgement of the harm. I looked at him for a long moment. My mind went back to sleepless nights, to Freya's trembling hand in mine after she finally testified. To the weight of that letter from Marta. I had been fighting for so long. And now something in me had shifted. I've already taken back everything that matters, I told him quietly. He blinked, confused. Lawyers don't understand victories you can't deposit in a bank. I turned and walked away, letting my silence finish the conversation. In the weeks that followed, I found myself spending more time outside. The Reyes home had blossomed, not just in flowers and vines, but in voices. Laughter carried through the trees. Chalk drawings decorated the walkways. The air had changed, lighter, more alive. One soft spring evening, I gathered a group of young girls beneath the oldest magnolia tree on the property. Each girl held a tiny sapling, roots wrapped gently in cloth. Their hands were small but careful. I knelt in the dirt with them, guiding them through the planting. A little girl, hair tied in messy pigtails, no older than 8, looked up at me with wide, uncertain eyes. "Will they grow big?" she asked. I smiled, pressing my palm gently to the soil. "Only if we let them feel safe." She nodded, then began to cover the roots with dirt. There was something fragile in her hope, and something sacred in her silence. Later, I walked the grounds alone. Twilight painted the sky in violets and soft grays. The old porch creaked as I stepped onto it. The wind carried the scent of new earth and fading flowers. I wrapped a shawl around my shoulders and sat, gazing out. I thought of all the names I had once worn: obedient daughter, invisible sister, discarded child. I thought of the rooms where no one saved a seat for me. I thought of Marta's trembling signature and Verina's crumbling empire. And then, I spoke, not to anyone present, but to the wind, to the memories, to all the silences that had ever tried to erase me. They buried my roots, but I found them again. The wind rustled gently, as if listening. I may never be whole, but I'm finally real. And for the first time in my life, I truly believed it. Some roots are buried, some are stolen, but truth has a way of growing back through concrete. Linnea's story reminds us that identity is not what we're told we are, but what we uncover, claim, and protect for ourselves. Have you ever questioned the version of your life someone else gave you? If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more real, raw family stories that challenge what we think we know about love, truth,